The office smelled of stale coffee and the faint tang of disinfectant, as if the air itself had been scrubbed of warmth. Commander Hayes sat behind his metal desk, his weathered face fixed in an unreadable mask. On the wall behind him hung framed photos of past SEAL classes, rows of men in uniform, with hard expressions and earned pride. Not a single woman stared back from those photographs. Spread across the desk in front of him lay Sarah Martinez's file. Pages opened like evidence laid out for a trial. Her obstacle course times had broken records. She had carried teammates through swamps when men twice her size quit. She had outlasted swimmers in water confidence training and never missed a target on the range. None of it mattered here. Hayes did not look at her when he slid the discharge papers forward. His voice was flat. As if the words had been practiced, he told her she was a distraction to the unit, that the men could not focus with her there. The phrase, unit cohesion, fell from his mouth like a verdict already decided. Sarah's vision blurred for a moment as she stared at the papers. 18 weeks of hell. 18 weeks of proving herself every single day. Each stroke of the pen trembled slightly, but not from fear. Her hands shook with rage, with the knowledge that every ounce of sweat, every bruise, every test survived meant nothing against prejudice, dressed up as policy. She gathered her gear in silence. The barracks, usually filled with banter and boots thudding on concrete, had gone quiet the moment she entered. Men she had bled and sweated beside suddenly found the laces of their boots fascinating. Not one lifted his head, only Rodriguez, the young recruit from Texas she had pulled out of the water when he nearly drowned. Spoke, he whispered. You saved my life out there. Martinez. She closed her duffel and looked at him with steady eyes. Graduate, she said. Become the SEAL you're meant to be. The weight of silence followed her as she crossed the compound. At the mess hall, she caught the sound of Instructor Kowalski's booming voice, carrying easily across the courtyard. He was surrounded by recruits, speaking with the confidence of a man, certain his words would be swallowed whole. Women crack under pressure. It declared, it's biology, not bias. When bullets fly, maternal instincts take over. They freeze. Start thinking about families instead of the mission. The recruits nodded with solemn faces, as if they had just heard a profound truth instead of a lie. Sarah stopped. Every muscle in her body wanted to march over and confront him with the names of women who had already died in combat, the pilots who had flown missions in Iraq, the medics who had run into gunfire in Afghanistan. Instead, she turned and locked eyes with him across the courtyard. Her voice carried clearly when she said, "We'll see about that." Sire. The courtyard hushed. Even the gulls seemed to pause overhead. Kowalski's face flushed, and he barked back, demanding she repeat herself. Sarah shouldered her bag and walked on without slowing, spine straight and head high. At the gate, she stopped and looked back once at the compound that had consumed her life for 4 months, the obstacle course where she had left skin on the ropes, the pool where she had nearly drowned, the classrooms where she had memorized weapon systems until her eyes burned. This place had tried to break her. When it failed, it had simply discarded her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it free and saw a message from her Marine recruiter. Heard what happened. Door still open. We could use someone with your skills. Sarah stared at the words, then typed back. When do I start? As the taxi carried her away from the gates, she made a silent vow. The SEAL trident might be out of reach, but when the bullets flew and lives hung in the balance, she would be ready to prove them all wrong. The first morning at Marine Corps Sniper School was wrapped in fog and silence. Sarah Martinez stood among the new candidates, mud already clinging to her boots as instructors barked orders. The atmosphere was stripped of politics and posturing. Nobody asked about unit cohesion or whether she was a distraction. The only measure here was performance. And performance was absolute. A rifle either hit or it missed. A stock either succeeded or it failed. That clarity sharpened Sarah like a blade pulled across stone. The training days stretched into endless trials. She crawled through grass under blistering sun until the shimmer of heat made the ground appear like liquid. Insects crawled across her face as she stayed motionless for hours, breathing in rhythm with the earth itself. In stalk exercises, she disappeared into terrain so thoroughly that evaluators walked within arm's length and never saw her. Mud became second skin. Camouflage netting transformed her into a shadow. Where other candidates twitched with impatience, Sarah moved only with breath. Every exhale slow. Every inhale measured. Her fury from rejection did not burn wildly anymore. It had been reshaped into control. The cold bore shot was the crucible every sniper candidate awaited with dread. The target stood at 1,100 yards. A speck on the distant range that seemed to shimmer like a mirage. One by one, candidates took their turn. Some missed high, others low. A few cracked under the waiting silence. When Sarah stepped up, she checked her rifle with calm precision. The scope gleamed under the sun, its glass steady beneath her cheek. She settled, timed her breathing, let her heart slow until the world seemed to pause. On her exhale, she squeezed. The round snapped downrange, and the spotter called the hit perfect center. The instructors exchanged glances, their stoic faces giving away flickers of surprise. Other trials followed. She assembled her rifle blindfolded in record time, her hands moving like she had rehearsed the sequence in her sleep. The stopwatch confirmed it faster than any candidate before her. She endured water immersion drills until her lips turned blue, holding calm while others thrashed to the surface. Every test became an equation she solved without hesitation. Each success erased another shadow of doubt, until the whispers of prejudice that haunted her at SEAL training were replaced by silent respect. Among peers, there was little talk, but glances told enough. Recruits who once smirked at her size now watched her work with grudging admiration. She was not loud. She never needed to remind anyone what she had done. Her performance was written in bullet holes, clustered tighter than any grouping on the line, in stalks graded higher than the majority, in a record board where her name etched itself above all others. Graduation arrived with no ceremony beyond a brief acknowledgement. She stood at the front of the formation, instructors announcing her as the top graduate, first in the class. Her scores eclipsed expectations. Her cold bore shot now whispered about like legend. She accepted the certificate with a steady grip, not smiling, not gloating. Respect had been earned not with defiance or argument, but with undeniable mastery. As the class dispersed, Sarah looked once more at the record board where her name shone at the top. It would remain there, a permanent mark, proof against anyone who tried to erase her worth again. She thought of the rifle in her hands, its scope like a second eye, clear and unblinking, breathing, focus, precision. Those had become her language. She was not defined by the rejection she had suffered. She had transformed it into fuel. And in doing so, she had become undeniable. The operations tent smelled of dust, canvas, and burned coffee. A diesel generator hummed faintly outside, its vibration rattling the mugs lined along a table. Intelligence maps were spread across the central desk, red markers stabbed into them to represent buildings inside a hostile compound. Photographs printed from drone feeds showed the mud-brick walls where 3 aid workers were being held. Commanders stood around the maps, their clipped voices turning the mission into neat lines and schedules. To them, Overwatch was an assignment for a warm body. Nothing more. They spoke of Sarah Martinez with indifference, as if any rifle on the ridge would do. Sarah stood to the side, hands folded loosely, expression calm. She listened without protest as her role was brushed aside. The commanders moving quickly to more pressing concerns. To them, the real story would unfold on the ground, where assault teams stormed walls. But she knew the margin of success lived in seconds. In shots taken at impossible distances, precision mattered most, where others thought it incidental. When the briefing ended, voices faded into the scraping of chairs and the shuffle of boots on dirt. Sarah stepped forward only when the room cleared. She studied the map, committing distances to memory, tracing possible sightlines. Her eyes lingered on the red marker stabbed into the courtyard where hostages were last seen. She pulled the folded sheet closer, rolling it with care before sliding it into her pack. The stopwatch clipped to her vest ticked faintly, a sound steady as her pulse, reminding her that inevitability would come soon enough. At her cot, she began her ritual. She cleaned the rifle with deliberate care, the cloth moving across steel with a rhythm as measured as breathing. She checked the bolt, polished the scope's lens until it reflected the dim lantern light without a smudge. Every click of adjustment, every smooth slide of metal, was its own act of defiance. If command dismissed her, her precision would stand in for recognition. Readiness was rebellion, and she would not yield it. Corporal Jenkins sat across from her, fumbling with his spotting scope. Straps tangled, his hands clumsy with nerves. He muttered to himself, checking and rechecking gear, as though repetition might still his unease. Sarah offered no comfort, only steadiness. She let the silence work between them until his motions slowed, until he began to mirror her calm without realizing it. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, they were ready. Sarah moved with quiet efficiency, slinging her rifle, shouldering her pack. The tent receded behind them as they stepped into the chill of morning. The desert air tasted of dust and iron. Shadows stretched long over the ground, and the base was alive with muted voices preparing for the day. Sarah led the way, boots crunching over gravel, eyes already on the distant ridge that would become their world. The climb into the mountains was a slow transition from chatter to silence. With each step, the voices of command fell away, leaving only wind moving across stone. Jenkins lagged behind, his breath audible in short bursts. Sarah did not turn, but she slowed enough to keep him close. The sky shifted from black to gray, the line of light creeping over the ridges like a fuse burning slowly. At their position, she dropped to one knee, unrolled the map, and marked landmarks against the terrain. She extended the bipod, set the rifle into earth molded by her hands, and lowered her cheek to the stock. Through the scope, the compound appeared as a shape still asleep in the valley. She exhaled, the sound steady, soft. A bridge between shadow and light. The engagement had not yet begun, but she was already prepared. The jagged rocks pressed hard into Sarah Martinez's elbows as she settled into position on the ridge. Dust scraped her cheek where it touched the rifle stock. The valley below lay quiet, the compound almost peaceful, its walls catching the pale morning sun. Through the scope she could see armed men pacing the courtyards, rifles slung carelessly, unaware that eyes tracked their every movement. From nearly 900 meters away, the hostages were still inside, and the mission clock ticked relentlessly toward their extraction window. Corporal Jenkins lay beside her, sweat already running down his temple despite the chill. His voice was low, strained, as he whispered the countdown. Windows at 20 minutes. 19 now. We need clearance. His hands twitched against the spotting scope, fingers drumming against metal in nervous rhythm. The radio crackled in her ear, static stretching between clipped words. The operations center demanded confirmation of targets, insisting they could not risk friendly fire. Sarah's jaw tightened. The sentry on the rooftop scanned the horizon lazily, one arm resting on his rifle. Any moment he could raise it, call out, and the hostages would be dragged underground. Higher command hesitated, but she could not. She steadied her breathing, pulling it into a cycle she had practiced until it became ritual. Inhale, hold, exhale slow. The world narrowed to crosshairs in distance. Her finger rested against the trigger's curve, the weight of inevitability pressing into her bones. The stopwatch clipped to her vest ticked faintly. Matching her heartbeat, every second wasted was another second closer to failure. Jenkins's whisper was tight. 18 minutes. He's looking around. Sarah. Any second, she cut him off gently. On my shot, her voice was calm, flat as stone. The same tone that had carried her through sniper school. The target stood broad against the pale sky. Range 847 meters. Correction dialed. Wind accounted for. Nothing else mattered. She let her body melt into the earth. Her pulse quiet. The weight of the rifle, an extension of herself. On the exhale, she squeezed. The rifle's crack shattered the silence. Recoil, pushing back into her shoulder. For the barest pause. The world held still. Then, more than a second later, the bullet found its mark. The rooftop sentry's body snapped back, then crumpled like a puppet with strings cut. His rifle clattered against the wall, sound lost in the wind. Jenkins exhaled sharply. Impact. Direct hit. Oh my God. Sarah. That was perfect. But she had already chambered another round. Her movements mechanical and calm. The brass casing rolled across the rock beside her, catching the sunlight as if marking the start of something irreversible. Below, the compound erupted into chaos. Shouts echoed against the valley walls as fighters poured into the courtyard, rifles lifted, eyes darting in every direction. Door slammed open. Figures scrambled toward defensive positions. A hornet's nest struck by a single stone. None of them knew from where death had come. Sarah kept her scope steady. Watching the ripples of panic spread, she felt no thrill. Only the quiet certainty of skill proving itself. The first shot was more than a kill. It was belonging. Proof that her place here was earned. Undeniable. An absolute. Command might have hesitated, but she had not. The mission clock ticked on, each second burning away. The hostage's survival now hinged on her calm hand and the brass casings that would pile beside her. She settled into her cycle again, ready for the next breath, the next target, the next proof. The valley was no longer quiet. Muzzle flashes burst from windows. Tracers carved the air above the pinned rescue team, and the compound seethed with armed defenders. Sarah Martinez lay steady behind her rifle, breath measured while chaos erupted below. Through her scope, movement on the rooftop caught her eye. A glint of glass flared against the sun. Dragunov, a hostile sniper, was scanning the ridgeline. If he found them, it would be over in seconds. Corporal Jenkins hissed beside her. He's got glass. High roof. Left corner. His voice cracked under the weight of fear. But Sarah was already calculating. Range 734 meters. Crosswind, slight. Left to right. Correction, half a mil. Her heartbeat stayed calm. Slower even than the stopwatch clipped to her vest. The enemy rifle rose into position, his barrel angling toward their perch. She had 3 seconds, maybe less. On her exhale, she broke the trigger. The hostile's head snapped back before his finger ever reached his trigger. His Dragunov tumbled across the rooftop as his body collapsed. Jenkins let out a strangled breath. You beat him by less than a second. Sarah chambered another round. Face impassive. Seconds are the difference, she murmured. Voice flat with certainty. The roar of engines thundered through the valley. Reinforcement vehicles charged down the dirt road. One, a pickup with a mounted machine gun. The other, a van stuffed with fighters. Dust plumed behind them. A storm racing straight for the rescue team's flank. Jenkins swore under his breath. But Sarah was already shifting. Crosshairs locking onto the first windshield. She centered on the driver's chest, squeezed, and sent glass spraying into the cab. The pickup veered hard, its machine gunner flailing as the vehicle rolled onto its side in a plume of dirt. Without pause, she shifted to the second. The van's driver was shouting. his mouth open in command. When her bullet punched through his skull, the van careened off the road, smashing into a ditch before bursting into smoke and confusion. Fighters stumbled out, coughing, disoriented, only to be cut down by Sarah's next rounds. Her bolt cycled with mechanical rhythm, brass casings piling against the stone beside her. Below, the rescue team shouted over the gunfire, their voices carried up faintly, desperation clear as they hugged cover, pinned by automatic fire. They had no idea an unseen guardian was shaping the battlefield from above. Every time a rifle rose in their direction, Sarah dropped the shooter before his finger could squeeze. Every time a machine gun barrel swung toward the team, her bullet ended the threat. Jenkins whispered in awe, eyes glued to his spotting scope. "You're not even hesitating." "How the hell are you this calm?" Sarah's breathing never faltered. "Because hesitation kills." The words came without emotion. As steady as the rifle in her hands, spent casings gleamed in the dirt, each one a testament to endurance. She ignored the ache in her shoulders, the raw pressure on her elbows pressed into rock. She ignored the storm of gunfire, the explosions of grenades thrown in panic. Her world narrowed to crosshairs and breath, the steady metronome of her own body, keeping time against chaos. More defenders rushed the courtyards, some firing wildly into the mountains. They were searching for her, but their bullets tore into empty stone. Sarah shifted smoothly from one target to the next, her rhythm unbroken. Instructors at SEAL training had once claimed women would freeze when the world fell apart. That maternal instinct would override combat instinct. Here, under the fiercest fire, Sarah did not freeze. She thrived. Dust clouds still hung in the valley from the destroyed vehicles. The wreckage of precision. The Dragunov sniper who might have ended them lay still on his rooftop. The rescue team remained pinned, but alive, shielded by her unseen hand. Prejudice claimed women cracked under fire. Sarah had just proved that under real pressure, she was the one holding the battlefield together. The compound had become a maze of muzzle flashes and screams. Through her scope, Sarah Martinez saw chaos sharpen into a series of equations. Hostages were being dragged toward the main building, figures in black, shoving them through doorways while shouting orders. Every second that passed pulled them deeper into concealment, closer to disappearing. Her world compressed into numbers. Distance 847 meters. Wind a steady cross, pushing right to left. Bullet drop 22 inches at this range. She filed each value without hesitation, her mind moving faster than the chaos unfolding below. Jenkins whispered frantically beside her. "They're moving the hostages. Extraction clock is under 5 minutes." His voice cracked with panic. But Sarah remained steady, cheek pressed to stock, breath as controlled as her heartbeat. A sudden movement in her scope seized her attention. A man braced an RPG on the second floor, sighting toward the rescue team pinned in the dirt below. Sarah broke the trigger, the shot smashing into his chest just as he steadied the launcher. His body arched backward, the unguided rocket tumbling harmlessly into the courtyard before detonating with a muffled crack. Dust billowed, but the team below lived. She cycled the bolt before Jenkins finished exhaling. "Window left. Moving target," he called. Sarah's crosshairs found a man raising a machine gun on the rooftop. Her round struck his throat, cutting him off before he could fire a burst. Another window lit with muzzle flash, and she shifted seamlessly, dropping the shooter before his second shot left the barrel. Her movements became metronomic fire. Bolt. Reacquire. Fire. Brass casings clinked and tumbled beside her elbow. Her kill counter on the rifle's digital feed glowed a climbing sequence, green digits that bore silent witness to her precision. Jenkins struggled to keep pace, whispering the numbers aloud in disbelief. 24. 25. Jesus. Martinez. 26. The hostages reappeared in her glass. One doctor in a white coat was yanked forward, his shoulder seized by a fighter, using him as a shield. Behind that human barrier, the terrorist leveled his rifle at the rescue team. The shot demanded perfection, a calculation with no tolerance for error. Inches stood between life and catastrophe. Jenkins hissed, "You can't take that," but Sarah was already adjusting. She shifted her hold a fraction, her finger brushing the trigger as she factored the crosswind, accounted for muzzle velocity, recalculated bullet drop with surgical calm. Her breathing slowed to nothing. Time stretched. Each second weighted with the lives of both hostage and rescue team. The trigger broke, the recoil pressed against her shoulder, and for a breath there was only silence. Then the terrorist's head snapped violently back, blood misting the air behind him. The hostage stumbled free, untouched, staring in stunned confusion at the man who had been using him as cover. The margin had been no wider than the space between his ear and collar. Jenkins exhaled a sound somewhere between awe and terror. That was 847 meters. Through a hostage shield? That's not possible. Sarah chambered her next round without response, eyes still fixed through the scope. The kill counter ticked upward again. Its green glow reflected faintly in the glass. She did not smile, did not break her calm. Numbers mattered, but lives saved mattered more. The white of the hostage's coat was still vivid in her sight, a reminder that every calculation was anchored in flesh and humanity. The compound's defenders faltered. Their squad leader lay dead, their sniper silenced, their vehicles destroyed, their hostages slipping from their grasp. Sarah's last casing rolled in the dirt beside her elbow, a small metallic sound swallowed by the vast silence after the storm. She stayed pressed to the rifle, steady as stone, knowing she had done what only impossible math could achieve. The debriefing room was packed shoulder to shoulder, the air conditioning struggling against the heat of so many uniforms pressed into one space. Sweat traced the collars of men who had spent their careers believing they understood what excellence looked like. At the front, the screen glowed with harsh light, replaying helmet cam footage that had already circled the intelligence desks. Every officer present watched the crosshairs track, the trigger break, and another figure fall in silence. No wasted shots, no hesitation, no blur of panic, only precision. The green kill counter ticked upward in the corner of the recording. 27, 28, 29. Each number glared like an indictment, daring anyone in the room to question whether it was real. Sarah Martinez sat quietly in the back, her desert camouflage still coated in Syrian dust. She made no move to draw attention, letting the images speak for her. The silence in the room grew heavy, broken only by the soft whir of the projector. Commander Hayes shifted in his chair, his skin pale. When the final shot appeared, the hostage shield shattered by a perfect round threading inches from disaster, he whispered into the thick, quiet, "That's not possible." His voice cracked, brittle against the weight of proof. Colonel Morrison stood at the front, his pointer resting against the frozen frame of that impossible kill. "Gentlemen," he said, voice low but steady, "this is not simulation. This is combat." Sergeant Martinez executed 29 confirmed eliminations in 47 minutes. All hostages rescued. 0 friendly casualties. The record speaks for itself. Murmurs rippled through the room. A few officers leaned forward, their disbelief giving way to reluctant awe. Others shifted uncomfortably, as if the sight unsettled something they had taken for granted. Hayes sat rigid, unable to meet the screen. Sarah rose slowly, the scrape of her chair cutting the silence. Dust streaked her sleeves, her boots still scarred from the jagged rocks of her perch. She did not look theatrical. She looked like what she was, a Marine who had done her job. Every head turned as she stepped forward, her presence drawing the air tighter. She stopped at the front, letting the silence stretch before she spoke. Her voice was calm, controlled, but it carried through the room like a rifle crack. "You said women crack under real pressure." Commander, her eyes fixed on Hayes, who finally looked up. "I guess you were wrong about that." The words hung there, undeniable, as the footage still frozen on the screen. Hayes opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His denial had already collapsed beneath the weight of the evidence. Officers around him avoided his gaze, their silence a judgment harsher than any reprimand. Sarah did not wait for his reply. She turned to face the room as a whole, her tone still even. "What matters is not who is allowed into your programs. What matters is what happens when the bullets are real, when the lives are real, and when failure is not an option." She gestured toward the screen. "3 people are alive tonight because I did my job." The murmurs died completely. No applause followed. No grand gestures of recognition. Only silence. The kind that acknowledged truth without knowing how to respond. Sarah let that silence stand. Vindication had never been about their praise. It was about proof. And the proof glowed in green numbers that none of them could erase. She stepped back, her dusty uniform catching the light of the projector. Quiet dignity carried her from the front of the room toward the door. Behind her, the silence deepened, settling over the men who once dismissed her. It was judgment enough. The desert air was warm and dry, carrying the faint scent of dust and jet fuel from the flight line. The debriefing room and its silence were behind her now. Out here, the base stretched in quiet order, the hum of generators steady, the sky impossibly clear. Sarah Martinez walked slowly across the gravel, hair rifle slung at hairside, the weight of it no longer heavy, but grounding. Each step felt lighter than it had in months. Though no medals or words of recognition had been offered, the proof she carried was not theirs to give. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She drew it out and shaded the screen against the sun. A message from her younger sister lit the display. "Proud of you, sis." Sarah's faint smile softened her face. A private expression away from the judgment of officers and the endless second-guessing of commanders. She typed her reply slowly. Finger steady. "Just doing my job." For a moment she stood there, thumb resting on the edge of the phone, her mind wandering back to the gate she had walked through months earlier. She remembered the sterile office that smelled of stale coffee, the photographs of SEAL classes that never included a woman, the discharge papers spread like a verdict across the desk. She remembered Kowalski's voice carrying across the courtyard, claiming women cracked when the pressure became real. That silence in the barracks, broken only by Rodriguez whispering thanks, had been the loneliest moment of her life. Now the contrast was undeniable. She had lain on jagged rock, her body still as the mountains around her, and delivered shots that even seasoned veterans claimed were impossible. She had threaded a bullet past a hostage's shoulder, saved lives, and turned chaos into order. The math had been deadly, but the clarity had been hers alone. No discharge paper, no failed office judgment could erase that certainty. She looked up from the screen and toward the horizon. The desert stretched wide, the line between sand and sky steady and unbroken. Proof, she realized, was never going to be stamped on a piece of paper or pinned to a chest in the form of a trident. Proof was the quiet knowledge that when the moment came, she had stood steady. It was the message from a sister who believed, the living hostages who would return home, the green glow of numbers that had climbed higher than anyone expected. Her rifle hung at her side, metal warm under the desert sun. It was not a symbol of violence to her but of clarity, the tool that had let her show the truth. She touched it once at the sling and then let her hand fall away. Recognition from institutions would always come late, if at all. What mattered was the certainty inside her and the legacy she left behind for those who still believed they had no place at the table. Sarah turned, walking slowly back toward her quarters. The horizon line behind her stretched endlessly, waiting for whatever came next. She did not need their applause. She had found something stronger. The proof she carried belonged to her, and through her, to everyone who would come after,